Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm just getting set up. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm assuming there's lots of people out there right now because drop shipments are just so cool. As Lisa mentioned today, we're going to be talking about drop shipments and really how to process one. I always start in a PowerPoint simply because you kind of have to start in a PowerPoint, but 80% of this presentation will be outside of the PowerPoint, will be inside GP. We're actually going to process one of these things. Today's agenda, we're going to cover what is a drop shipment. That is our few slides. We're going to get into the actual process. We're going to enter a drop shipment, create the purchase order, receive the purchase order, process the invoice, and then any questions or comments that are left at the end, please feel free to ask them at that point. However, if you do have questions as we go through, like Lisa was saying, just put them in the question box, and I'm pretty casual with this stuff, so feel free to interrupt me at any time. So what is a drop shipment? I always like to start with Wikipedia. They don't even call it a drop shipment, they call it the process of drop shipping. You can read that, I don't have to read it to you. It's also out there on Wikipedia, you can Google it at any point. But in plain English, basically what a drop shipment is you want to ship something directly from your supplier to your customer. Okay, so basically Ted has the chair that you want to ship, and Bill wants to buy the chair, and you want Ted to ship the chair to Bill and give you the invoice so you can invoice Bill for even more money. So in a normal process, this is our warehouse, some little warehouse with a truck there. Normally, to get what we have is goods going from the factory to the warehouse, from our warehouse to the customer with the little grocery bags there. To do that, we communicate with the vendor through purchase orders. We communicate with the customer through sales orders. Eventually, the purchase order becomes a voucher. The sales order becomes an invoice. Everybody's happy. And the goods generally will sit in the warehouse for some span of time. They're not necessarily related to one another. In the case of a drop shipment, we've still got our vendor, we've still got our purchase order, we've still got our customer, we've still got our sales order, but we're moving the goods, like I said, directly from the factory to the customer. So there's no need for our warehouse. In fact, a lot of companies do drop shipments actually work out of somebody's living room. Our sales order within GP to process a drop shipment is actually going to be tied directly to our purchase order. And that's not fancy, and that's not even unique to drop shipments. That's just something that drop shipments take advantage of and make this really cool. Okay, and then, excuse me, the purchase order itself, when we do the receiving transaction and close the purchase order, the sales order again gets updated and we're ready to actually invoice. So we do streamline the dropship process by joining those two documents together. That's it. That's all the slides except for one. So let's jump into GP. So the first thing to do when you want to process a dropship order, as the name implies, is actually enter a sales order. We want to put an order into the system, so we'll pop over here to sales. We're going to go to sales transaction entry. And I'm going to enter myself a standard order. Now, notice this data is in 2017. I am using the Fabricam company or the World Online, depending how long you've been in the industry. Honestly, if you've been around to remember the World Online, you probably know how to do this stuff already. So here's our order number. We're going to choose good old Aaron. I'm going to put it in the rod batch that exists in every company. All right, we're going to order some monitors today. We need 10 monitors to be shipped directly to Aaron Kits. Okay, now the one thing that we need to do to identify this as a drop shipment is just check this little box right here. The D does not stand for dugout, it stands for drop ship. I'm going to put in 10 monitors here, okay? And the price is the price. Everything else, all of this is just standard GP. I'm just entering an order. The only real difference here is that dropship checkbox right there. Okay, I can expand it out. I can still blow it up if I want. Oops, credit limit. I've been doing this a lot, so I think we drove poor Aaron over his credit limit. Let's enter a comment. Okay, so we'll see that. Okay, so we want that comment to drive through to the warehouse if we can. Sorry, through the purchasing group. Okay, once we're happy with this order, we can do whatever our standard process is. We could print it and send it to the customer and let them know that it's coming. Oh, one other thing, the requested ship date. Let's say Aaron wants this on the 3rd of the month. Okay, so we'll set it to the 30th, and hopefully we'll get them there on time. So once we're happy with all this, what we want to do, we want to actually purchase it. Okay, yep, you can see that I've practiced this a little bit. I have a few purchase orders here, so that's how I know that it'll work. So the first thing you might notice is that the vendor ID is automatically populated. Okay, so we normally buy these monitors from Advanced Office Systems. Now, two things to note, I can go and change that. So if I decide, you know, I've got, who else is on my list here? I've decided to phone Beaumont Construction instead to get these monitors because everyone knows construction companies stock a lot of monitors. I can change it at this point, okay? And then if there's no vendor item for M1500s at Beaumont, I will have to set up the vendor item, which I can do on this tab right here, okay? I want to switch it back to Advanced. Now, how did I set up Advanced as the primary vendor? Over here in my inventory module, under my item, let's pull up our M1500s. Okay, we're going to go to quantity sites, right up here under the go-to. And we choose the site ID. Now on my sales order, I didn't point it out, but on my sales order, it was the default site ID was warehouse. So if I choose warehouse as my site ID here in the list, okay, you can notice here my primary vendor ID is Advanced. Okay, if I leave that blank, when I first bring up that purchase order window, this guy right here, in fact, everything will have a red X because there would be no vendor in there. Okay, so I would have to actually select the vendor. So setting a primary vendor isn't mandatory, but it sure does help the folks on the sales counter know who they have to buy these things from. And let's put Advanced back in there again because I know that works. So our PO date is today, that's fine. If you take a look at, at our item, the required date here is April 30th, 2017. So you can see that information entered by the salesperson who's talking directly to the customer is going to be passed over to the purchaser who has to go out and talk to the vendor. Of course, I assume that's two different people at your company. If you're in your living room, it's probably just you. Okay, so once we're happy with all of these tabs, and we've got our items selected, and the quantities and dates are all correct, we double check to make sure it's going to the right place, we can go ahead and click on Generate. Now, one thing I'll give you a little bit of word of warning. If these things are unchecked, it won't generate anything. That happened to me once earlier today. So we'll go ahead and we'll say screen so that you can see the same reports I see and you don't have to come to my office and look at the printer. So here's what we're about to generate. PO number is 2078. It's a dropship PO, unit of measure, everything else. Okay, so it did what I said it would do. Okay, we're going to leave that open because we'll need it later. So now it's time to take a look at the purchase order. So our sales order is entered, we printed it, we sent it to Aaron, everybody's happy. Aaron's excited because this monitor is coming on April 30th, at least so we told him. So over here I've got a couple choices. Now I like to use Smart List a lot. And what I do is I generally will create a Smart List when I have a company that's doing drop shipments. I'll create two Smart Lists. One is under the payable purchase line items, okay? And I've called it drop shipments waiting for receipt. And all that is a list of all of my drop ship POs that I've not received against yet, okay? It's a really quick one. So I can come in here. Now, what some folks will do is modify it and say, drop shipments entered today. So now my buyer can come in and say, okay, well, what got entered today? I can take a quick look at it. Okay, oh, this amount is actually wrong. We actually pay, based on the new contracts, $115 for this particular monitor. Freight's good, everything's good. What I can do at this point is go ahead and print it and send it to my vendor and actually tell them to buy it. So if we print it, let's go ahead and print. Now obviously you're going to have a prettier purchase order document at your company. This one's about as pretty as the demo company gets. But you can see here, I've got my ship to is Aaron Fitz Electrical in South. Here's my vendor. Here's who's actually buying it. Here's our PO number. So all of the information the vendor needs to actually send this to where we want it to go. Okay, I'm going to open that PO number again. Okay, so the next step is some time has gone by. We've sent this PO off to our vendor. They've processed it. They've shipped the goods. Now, whatever your communication mechanism is, at some point you get notified that the goods got delivered to the customer. So either the customer said, yeah, I got it, or you've got, you've got notification from the vendor, from the carrier, somebody told you it got delivered. When it gets delivered, you can either come back into the PO and go to Actions, Invoice the PO items, or under Purchasing, you're going to go to Enter Match Invoices. Okay, so we're going to select Advanced as our vendor. We're going to come in here to Auto Invoice. Okay, and notice here PO 278 is in here just like any other PO, ready to be invoiced. Notice the little check. I think that's a fun little touch. Okay, so we're going to select that line. Now notice this checkbox here, this SL. If the item, if we want to record serial numbers or lot numbers for the item, we would check that. And when we do actually click on the invoice button down here, what happens is it'll pop open the standard serial lot number interface so that we can actually track the serial numbers and lot numbers. I'm not going to do that now because that's just a bunch of extra steps. I'm going to go ahead and receive all 10 of them. You can do partial receipts, and it will actually update the fulfilled quantity with the partial receipt quantity. So if we had a case where, we ordered 10, the vendor shipped 5 of them today and 5 of them the next day, we can actually handle those situations. So we'll go ahead and we'll say invoice. Okay, so here we have our standard invoice, purchasing invoice entry. I want to take a quick look at the distributions because this is one area where drop shipments are a little bit different, and some people tend to forget a little bit. Where did this come from? So our purchase account, in a normal purchase order environment where I'm buying inventory, my offset here would obviously be inventory. So I'd be receiving $1,150 worth of inventory and offsetting it against my payable. Now, this one's using purchases clearing account for inventory. Quite often we'll create a drop ship clearing account just so we know that those the transactions in there are drop shipments. Where we actually assign that, there's one of two spots. So the first one is back on the item master. So we'll go back to item maintenance. And notice here this accounts button will come through, and one of those accounts is the dropship items field. Okay. So if there's an account in this field, GP will use that account by default. You might notice I don't actually have an account in there. So if you only have one dropship clearing account for the entire company, much like many other posting things, you can go to Tools, Set Up Posting, and Posting Accounts. We'll switch to inventory just to restrict the list. And within the inventory, we have the dropship items account field. And you can see here, this is where the purchase clearing account got assigned. 0002735 is our account. And going back to our transaction, that was the account that got hit. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to post that. Once we've posted that transaction, it's going to give us like 37 reports because I didn't affect my posting like a normal person. Okay, so you can see here, here's what we bought. We've received it. Unit cost is 115. So we have a payable to the vendor at this point. We've already got our voucher. We know that we have to pay that guy. Accounts payable is going to take care of it for us. We also have, I'm making air quotes, fake inventory for a couple of minutes sitting in the purchase clearing account. Okay, so we don't need to look at all of these. Okay, so our buying department has done their jobs. They went out, they got the stuff, they got it shipped to Aaron. Aaron has the stuff. Now it's time to invoice him because he's such a happy guy. So I'm going to go back to sales. First of all, I want to go back to my smart list. So I told you there was 2 smart lists I create. The first one had to do with the drop shipments waiting for receipt. If I refresh this list now, just so you know I'm not lying, our PO is gone. So we don't have any drop shipments waiting for receipt anymore. It's fully received. Now down in the sales, under sales line items, I create a favorite called drop ship line items ready to invoice. The criteria for this is really, really simple. I'll bring it up for you. Okay. Drop ship is equal to 1. That means this is a drop shipment. The document type is equal to order in my case because I enter everything as orders. And the quantity fulfilled is not equal to 0. It will stay 0 until the purchase receipt has actually fulfilled it. And then what I do is I do add the quantity fulfilled column here just so that you can see how many are ready to invoice. Okay, so if I double click this, it's going to bring me back to my order and I can see that I've got 10 here and 10 are fulfilled. Everything's ready to go. It looks good. Oh, look, my unit cost got updated to 115. That's interesting. I guess the buyers did the job and saved us some money. I can go ahead and print my invoice the same way I always do. Sorry, no, I can't because I haven't transferred it yet. So let's go ahead and transfer it. Everything succeeded. Okay, so now we have our invoice. Now we can print our invoice and send it to the customer the same way we always would. Now, I do want to show you one last thing about this document. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take it out of my batch so that I can post it. Unfortunately, I can't show you distributions until we post it for the actual cost of sales because in an invoice, it doesn't calculate those until you actually post them. So let's close our window, print it to screen. All right. So here's our distribution for this particular order, and you can see here we've hit our purchases clearing account as our cost of sales line, as our offset. Okay, so instead of hitting the actual inventory account like we would if these monitors had come out of our warehouse, we're actually hitting that purchases clearing account. So basically those amounts should tie together easily one-to-one because they should always be the same amounts. So it should be easy to keep that purchase clearing account at 0. All right, the rest of this stuff, honestly, is just standard stuff you probably look at every day, our distributions, our lot numbers. If the items are lot tracked items and you've entered lot tracking throughout the receiving process, it'll actually flow through and print on the invoice as well. Okay, so any lot tracking or serial information that you need will show up on your document. Now notice here, if you remember, this is my fulfilled and waiting for invoicing. If I refresh this one, you can see my thing is gone. It's been moved off to history. It's no longer in order. It's waiting to be invoiced. So that is a 20-minute synopsis on how we process a drop shipment in Dynamics GP. And that brings us to our very last slide, which is the one that has all my name and stuff on it. So my question for Lisa would be, are there any questions currently sitting in the queue?
Thanks, Rod. At this time, there are not any questions, so I encourage anybody who has a question to go ahead and type it out. If you don't want to type it out, just hit the raise your hand button and I will unmute you and we can speak about the question that you have at hand. Drop shipments in 20 minutes. You did a great job.
Well, thank you.
I don't see any questions coming in. Is there anything else that you'd like to, any other wisdom you'd like to impart on the attendees before we go ahead and let everybody get back to their lunch or their morning or their afternoon?
Well, with the technology being as it is, it's a pretty simple use. It's a pretty simple series of transactions. The biggest burr under people's saddle, I find, tends to be the communication piece. So you got to make sure there's a good communication between either yourself and the vendor or yourself and the customer. Just so you know when things have been received, stuff like that. That tends to be the biggest hurdle for people is we issue this dropship PO and maybe don't get notified that the drop shipment actually happened. But assuming the communication's in place, this is a really simple process and it's really easy to do, really easy to implement.
Great. Well, again, thank you, Rod, for your time. I'd like to remind everybody that there will be a questionnaire that it will be sent automatically to you at the end of the webinar. We encourage you to please fill out with your suggestions, your comments, etc. Rod does receive a copy of the comments and your feedback, so it not only helps him, but it also helps us to determine future sessions for you here within the GPUG community. So if you could take a few moments to fill that out, I would greatly appreciate it, and so would Rod. With that, we'll go ahead and say goodbye to everybody for this afternoon, and once again, thank you, Rod, for taking your time to not only put the presentation together today, but also to deliver it to the audience.
Awesome. Thank you. No worries.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.